Joshua, what's going on, man? Welcome to the Dad Edge.
Hey man, I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad we sorted this out.
I am too. I am too. I definitely have a place where I want to start, but before we get started, do you want to hear something kind of funny about this show?
Let's hear it.
All right. So anytime we ever talk about porn, anytime, like I have a porn expert, you are the first former actor that I've ever had on the podcast. But here's the interesting thing. The downloads for this show will be absolutely off the charts. But from a social
Yeah.
media perspective, guys are like, oh well, I don't want anyone to see that I liked that or commented on it, but they'll definitely listen, but they won't really show themselves on social media so much. So, but that's just some context. I mean, we've talked about this topic so many times. I've seen that trend so many times. But
It is
yeah,
funny where I'll do a podcast and it gets like astronomical engagement,
yeah.
but the reel that we post, if we do like a collab post on IG and only gets like 20, 30,000 views or something like that, it's like, but I've got a million downloads. So it's funny. It's
Yeah.
so true.
It is true, man. So I want to get to what your family looks like, and you got a newcomer to the family here in
Uh,
January. But what I'd like to do is level set what your family looks like now, and then I want to go back to your childhood. I know you didn't grow up with a dad, but let's
yeah.
start with the current, and then I want to go to how you grew up.
Yeah, so currently my family and I we live in Dallas, Texas, and my wife Hope and I have been married for going on 8 years, and we've got four little boys. So Cannon is 5, Lincoln's 3, Judah is 2, and Abel will be born early January. So my wife let me know that she's got 1 week left in the second trimester, and like it's funny because like a third trimester is always her favorite until it's not. Like she
Right.
feels great. Like, hey, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to meet this little guy, but I'm ready to have him out of my body. So
So real quick, you said Cannon, right? Cannon.
yeah, so Cannon, Lincoln, Judah, and then our youngest little guy to be born in January, Abel.
So is this four boys? My
Yep, four boys,
okay,
squad.
bro, like, come on. I have four boys. I
Oh,
do.
that's amazing.
17, 15, 9, and 7. Now, the funny thing is, so I've said this many times, but like when you have three boys, okay, people are like, wow. But when you have four, the wow becomes like, whoa, wow. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, especially being in the South, it's like the typical thing to say is like, man, you got your hands full.
You got your hands full. Yeah, thanks. But
Like every time like we're in a grocery store, it's like, oh,
yeah.
you got your hands full. I'm like, yeah, yes, we do.
Well, and what are the ages again right now?
5, 3, and 2.
Okay. Okay. So you're in the shenanigans, but the shenanigans get bigger and crazier. So like a lot of people have asked, I'm ahead of you by 10, 12 years, but
Yeah.
a lot of people are like, dude, like what's it like? Four boys. I've narrowed it down to this description, and it always gets a laugh. I'm like, okay, you really want to know? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, imagine you being at a fraternity party where everybody's drunk and
Right.
but no one wants to sleep, no one ever passes out, and you never get to leave. That is my house. Like I, mean, I
I
find
love it.
the most random things. I found a pair of sunglasses in the fridge last week. I found a half-eaten peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the bathroom. Josh in the bathroom, come on, like I find food
That
in the
makes
bathroom, right?
yeah,
There's some shenanigans,
yeah,
but yeah, it's
yeah.
your
Our youngest little guy, he loves to have a bagel with cream cheese for breakfast every morning, and you will find a piece of that bagel, yeah, somewhere,
somewhere.
closet, inside of a bathroom drawer, like somewhere random. Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty typical for our house as well.
You only need to worry when you're like, oh, I finally found it. Like you being the dad and be like, oh, there it is. I'm still hungry. Like that's when you need to
Oh
probably
yeah.
worry. But I laugh because I joke around all the time, like with my kids. I'm like, if I didn't laugh, I would kill you all. Like you just have to
It's
have
so
a sense of humor.
It's like, yeah, there's times where they'll do something, or all of them will do something. It's like, what else? What else
Yeah.
is there to do?
What else? Yeah. So let's go back to your childhood. You grew up in a small town in South Carolina. Your mom had you when you were 16 years old and no dad. And the way I've
Yeah,
heard you describe it is like one grocery store in town and kind of everybody knows everything about each other. But what tell us more about
yeah.
this.
Yeah, so that was the thing that was uniquely traumatic for me. That the town was so small that you had essentially one gas station, one grocery store, and the probability of you seeing everyone that lived in that town at some point was pretty high. So I would see him in town, and I knew him to be my dad, but he was just never, my father in my life or in my home. We had randomly tried to connect, or he had tried to reach out to me a few times, and from his perspective, him being 16 and starting to live his life, because I think he got married like 3 or 4 years after I was born, and then he starts to get older, and I can only imagine the level of shame that was associated with every time he
Right.
would see me or see my mom. And it made sense that the longer it went on, the more awkward it would be.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened. I think that he tried to connect and really didn't know how, and then we were in such close proximity that just time went on, and it just became increasingly awkward. So I mean, I don't think it was any kind of like him being like masochistic or any or any like, I don't think it was him trying to be like mean to me or dismissive to me or anything like that. I just think that it became increasingly awkward, and he didn't know what to do or to say, and then
Yeah.
he just chose not to do or say anything. And that went from me being confused to me being very frustrated. And like many men, high achiever personality, already feeling like I got to prove myself to the world. And now you add this to the mixing pot of the emotions that a teenage boy would have. Now it's like, well, I gotta make the best grades. I gotta be the best athlete. I gotta do the thing so that I can prove to myself and to those around me that I am worth something.
Wow, man. So you don't have you ever like interacted with him? Have you ever had a relationship with him?
Yeah, man, it's pretty neat. So, my wife, just being the rock star she is, like this is like 3 months after we started hanging out. She like gets on Facebook and finds my like half brother on there, and somehow acquires my dad's phone number. And she's like, "You need to call him." And I was like,
Oh my
"All
gosh.
right." And and then I was just doing some like soul searching at that time, and I was thinking, gosh, there's been so much that's happened to me in my life, and I've directly blamed him. And I think we live in a culture where, she shouldn't have worn that, or that wouldn't have happened, or if you shouldn't have been there and that wouldn't have happened, or if I would have had this, I wouldn't have done that. And that's kind of the, where I landed, where I was like, man, if I would have had a dad, I wouldn't have made some of the decisions that I made. If I would have had a dad, the X, Y, and Z. And there was so much frustration that had boiled up within me at that point in my life. I was coming out of the most chaotic season in my life, and I call him, and the first thing that I wanted to say to him was, "I'm sorry. I'm
Wow.
sorry for holding this burden on you," because he was unaffected by it from how I felt. Like how I felt didn't affect him because he didn't know how I felt. So often the unforgiveness that you hold on to doesn't impact the other person, it impacts you. So
100%.
the first thing I wanted to do was get that off of me. So I was like, hey man, I haven't talked to you in probably 20 years, but I just want you to know I've done a lot of stuff in my life, and I've made a lot of decisions that I pinned on you, and I just want to say I'm sorry. And that's how the conversation started. And I think in a very real way, if you go into a situation where there's going to be some type of reconciliation where, you're something crazy happened within a relationship or a friendship, and, you go to seek out that forgiveness and kind of to mend things, all like every time that reconciliation, the restoration that you hope to have, if it doesn't meet your expectations, sometimes it will stop you from doing it, or there will be genuine, something that happened that was restorative, or there will be some kind of reconciliation. But if it doesn't meet up with your expectations, you will feel unsatisfied. You'll continue to feel burdened by that. But if you're just like, hey, I'm gonna do my part and I'm gonna let it go. And that's what happened. I told him that I was sorry and I wanted to know how he was doing. But to be honest, like, there wasn't this, okay, we're gonna, go on this like 10-day like hunting retreat or whatever and like be bros forever now. I talk to him every once in a while. um, I I love him. I think the best of him. I hope the best for him and his family, but we don't talk on a consistent basis. And that's what I thought would happen, and it didn't. But at the same time, I didn't put that burden on myself, because like, if it wouldn't have met my expectations, it could have crushed me and actually made me, go 10 steps backwards. But I was just like, hey, I'm going to do my part. I hope that you're well, and I would love it if you were in my life, but logistically, we don't live close enough to one another. He's in South Carolina, I'm in Texas. I'm kind of moved all over the place, but I never lived there since I was, in high school, and I was just okay with that. And that's just kind of where I am, where it relieved the burden of those feelings, but there's not this incredible relationship with me and him, and I'm okay with that.
That is such a testament to, I just read, I just interviewed Gary John Bishop,
Mm,
who is the best-selling author of like on F Yourself, and he just wrote a book
yeah,
called Grow Up, be the parent that you wanted and that kind of thing. And he talks about, I mean, he writes it in this book like no other author I've ever experienced, or no other like in your face like I've experienced. Because like you, like I didn't have a relationship with my biological father till I was 30, and
yeah,
it wasn't planned. It was by mistake, and there was a lot of animosity before he and I, you know, actually, I would say both agreed that we were going to have a relationship. And,
right.
but very, very early on in the relationship, we had one conversation about like the past. And I just basically asked him, I was like, can you tell me why you left when I was little? And then I actually had a very brief relationship again with him when I was 12, and he left again. And I was like,
Mm,
can you please explain? And he did, in a very humble way. And I was like, okay, cool. You know, I'm sorry for the part I played in this. I forgive you for your part in this, and let's just move on. And so many people have asked me, like, dude, like, how can you have a relationship with your dad? He wasn't a part of your life for 30 years. Like, the guy walked out on you. Like, how could you do it? I never understood it until what you just said. And just now reading Gary John Bishop's latest book, was the only person that completely rips apart and shreds is the person that holds that, right? Because
yeah,
I look at my dad, and my dad, when he was a kid when he had me, just like your dad was a kid when he had you. And my dad
yeah,
was a Vietnam vet. He was going through PTSD. He had a really horrible marriage with my mom. And I think as a 21-year-old kid, 25-year-old kid, when he actually left, like he was like literally, I think, barely hanging on and probably doing the best with what he had, and just felt like there was no other way to do it. And
yeah,
had it to do over again, I think he'd make a different choice. But like, I think that's such a strong message for people out there, for, whether you had a traumatic childhood or you had abandonment or whatever, is like, listen, like, if you're agonizing over this, there's probably a really good possibility here that you haven't taken ownership in whatever it is you need to take ownership with. And if you're a kid, it's quite frankly very little, because the adult in the mix of this is your father or your mother. It's that forgiveness
yeah,
piece, like that grace, like, hey,
yeah.
if you're not going to forgive, that's going to eat the person alive who holds it, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm So I've got a book coming out in the spring, and the part that I'm most excited about is the book ends with a very clear, not super personal, but a very clear apology letter to my dad. And my hope is that, the thing that the burden that you're holding on to, and that forgiveness that you're not extending, even if it's in your heart of hearts, if you send the letter and you don't get a response, or you send the email or the text and you don't get a response, if you can't get a hold of that person, man, just do your part. And you have to be able to let that go, because you are the one that pays the price for that if you don't.
I 100% agree with that. And thank you for sharing that. You know, your story was really fascinating, because I think when you grew up like you did, and somewhat kind of like what I did, I know a lot about your background, and you and I kind of grew up sort of similar. And I think when you grow up with like these abandonment things or things that happen, like there's a part of you that is a high driver for
Oh
success.
yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you probably just at the core of who you are, you just want to prove, or you want so badly to know that you're enough, right? And a lot of us, I think we chase the wrong things for years. And I don't necessarily, I don't do that anymore, because I'm in my 40s. I've learned, but when we're younger, we're like gunning after the things that prove, like we're actually trying to prove the fact, like I am enough, I'm good enough, like sports or
Yeah.
grades or whatever else. For you, I know, it was in your early 20s. You started modeling, you started, and your dream was to be an actor, correct?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I actually started modeling and acting when I was like 13, 14. Did that up until college, studied theater in college, and then dropped out the second semester of my sophomore year, and I moved to Hollywood to pursue acting. I was having a lot more success modeling than I was acting, but a lot of the times those modeling gigs got me in the rooms where I would meet with casting directors and things like that. So I moved out to Hollywood, signed with an agency, and like many people that was chasing the dream, I had to get another job to mediate my expenses, because I was getting auditions here and there, and I was doing a modeling job here and there, but I was living in the middle of West Hollywood, so like super expensive, and at the same time, trying to keep up with the people around me. So spending every cent I had. And yeah, it was a wild time, but that was like when I was like 21, 22.
Wow. And so this actually all happened, I think you were in LA, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And bartending, and two girls walk in, and
yeah, so
they're
I'm
in the
I'm
industry.
bartending. Yeah, so I'm bartending at a it's a steakhouse that turns into a bar. It still serves food, but more of a bar scene in the middle of West Hollywood, like on Sunset Boulevard, adjacent to the House of Blue. So like kind of right in the thick of things. And to get a job there, like you don't show a resume, you show a headshot. That's just kind of one of those places it is. But yeah, so I'm working there. Two girls walk in, they sit down, and they ask if I was interested in acting. And I was excited, because I thought, like, okay, this is how you get opportunities. They're going to introduce me to someone, or they're working on a project. And they were like, no, we're actually talking about porn. And essentially they were headhunters. They were like headhunters. So the way that worked was, they would go out and they would meet guys or girls they thought that would kind of fit the bill to be in those films. And if they ended up, working, they would get compensated for that. And that's pretty much what happened. So these two girls, like, hey, I would love for you to have a meeting with our agent. And I had saw porn for the first time when I was around 13. And I watched it some, as much as you could back then. Like I was like, I remember like downloading it and trying to watch it on LimeWire. But it was something, I think, more so than me consuming the pornography, me seeing the pornography. It caused me to pursue women in a different way. I was already pursuing them to be liked, to be affirmed. And now I was like, well, I guess this is what being in a relationship with a girl is like, because I didn't see a healthy dynamic in my home. There was never a dad in my life, except for a very short period. My mom was married for a few years, and it was bad. It was a very bad situation. But I see this porn, and it's like, well, I'm already pursuing girls, to be liked, and maybe I'll pursue them in this way. So I think the porn, it changed the way that I saw relationships. It changed the way that I saw women, and I started pursuing them in that way. And that was another level of conquest, another level of affirmation. But I say that to preface, when they said porn, I didn't think like, oh my gosh, like what is that? I'd been exposed to it. So your level of exposure often, determines how you respond to something. And I by no means was seeking after a position in that industry or wanted to do porn. But when they said it, I was like, not a good idea, but not the worst idea. So I go and I meet with their agent.
So you were like only 24 at the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
just
not 25. Yeah. So I was like maybe like 23, 24. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, still just kind of like, a kid at that point.
Oh, for
So
sure.
you meet with this agent,
Mm.
and what's going through your mind?
Yeah, dude. I'm like, I'm scared.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, it's like going into it, I was thinking like it's gonna be like in this sketchy place, and like he's gonna be sketchy. And I get there, and this studio is adjacent to Universal Studios in the middle of Studio City, so in this like very nice area, and it's like this nice business complex. And I walk in, and it's this English guy wearing a three-piece suit with this like gigantic double Windsor tie, and English guy, like English accent, and just like talking to me. And he's pretty much like, hey, uh, why are you here? Tell me three things. How did you grow up? What are you doing in LA, and what do you hope to accomplish? And I was like, well, I just, grew up pretty much me and my mom, and I want to do modeling and acting, and I guess I want to be famous. And it's so funny to say that now, because that's something I really been leaning into. It's like when someone says, I want to be famous, no, you don't. Like that's not even a thing. That's not a career. That's not an accomplishment. You want X amount of people, to know you. Like, how do you quantify famous? What you're really saying is there's something broken in me that I believe something external is going to fix. I believe if enough people know my name, if I have enough success, if I make enough money, those things will medicate the problem that I have internally. And I'm hoping that I can achieve something to fix something inside. But I mean, that's what I was looking for. It's like I loved acting. I still do. I love the arts. I love it. Um, but I wanted those things so that I would feel a certain way. And that's what I told him. I was like, yeah, I grew up, him hearing this in retrospective, this guy comes from a broken home.
Yep.
He's seeking, the applaud and the affirmation from other people because he didn't get it. And this is someone that I can easily manipulate. So he is like, hey, you're a good looking guy. I can make you famous. You got acting experience. The porn industry is shifting to where they're doing these like parodies of films. There's doing these like, these big budget films where there's a script, and there's all this acting involved. And you've already got the experience, so it's going to be advantageous for you because you've already got that, and you'll be able to be the star. You'll be the guy. And I heard what he was saying, and I knew like I didn't walk in there so I could become a famous porn star, but everything he was saying was making me believe, well, I haven't made it yet. And it's crazy because if you compare yourself to the upper echelon of the people in your circle, or just other people in general, you'll never enjoy the success you're actually having. You'll always see yourself as a failure if you're looking at yourself through the lens of other people's success and accomplishments and lives, and what other people are good at. You'll never be able to enjoy your life no matter how much success you have. In reality, I was doing okay. I was, I was on my way to being successful. I had a good agent. I was getting plenty of auditions. I was doing, I was climbing my way towards the dream that I had, but at the same time, I believed that I wasn't good enough. So I heard this counterfeit version of my dream, and he was ready to hand it to me. So I was like, sure, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah.
And I do one film, and little did I know, because it's easy to believe, I'm gonna go show up at this, place, and I'm gonna hold a camcorder or something and like hook up with this girl, and no one's gonna know. I'm gonna get a little bit of money for it, and then I'm gonna go on about my life. And maybe I'll do it again, maybe I won't, but I don't you believe that my decisions, my choices, they're not going to have an impact on my life, and certainly not the rest of my life. You don't even like begin to think that in your mind.
Man. Um, and so you do this first film and it goes viral, right? And so
Yeah.
much so that your uncle calls your mom, right?
Yeah, I mean, just being in a small town, it's like, gosh, you do anything that is worth talking about, and everyone's going to hear. So it goes viral. She hears about it, but what happened first was my agent, my mainstream agent, found out
Right.
about it, sat me down. It's like, hey, uh, there's clear, there's parts in your contract that are very clear. If you do anything, if your likeness gets diminished to the point where it would be detrimental for us to represent you, we'll have to part ways, and we can't be associated with that. So, they fire me pretty much. And then I feel like right after that, I feel like I hang up the phone with her, and then my mom calls and she's like, hey, your uncle just said you were doing porno movies. Is that true? I just felt like
Mm.
the biggest scumbag, man. I felt terrible. Just like my mom asking me that, like, it's one thing to like know that, you know, I was a knucklehead when I was a kid. I was like trying to hook up with girls, like, you know, when my mom was at work, or, just like doing all kinds of stuff and getting busted doing something like that is one thing. But like my mom calling me and asking me that, I just felt like slime. I just felt terrible. And what I really thought about was how many sacrifices she had made to get me to where I was. We were a low income family, and I always had new headshots. I always had, someone editing and putting together a reel for me. I went to basketball camps. I had stuff that the other kids had that I know my mom didn't have the ability to afford, but somehow she always made it happen. And she fought hard for me to get to where I was. And in a lot of ways, I had made it. I was doing okay. And for a lot of people, I made it further than some people that pursue this for all their lives made it. And I'd blown it. I'd blown it, and she was disappointed and hurt. And that sucked, man. That was a terrible conversation. And then after that conversation, like many people, you'll get to a place in your life where something will happen. A relationship will end, you'll get fired, um like like something will happen, like there'll be a crossroads that happens in your life. Maybe it was your fault, maybe it wasn't, but something happens in your life, and then you have a choice. Do I allow the circumstances that are no longer in my control to determine how I live the rest of my life, or do I man up and dust myself off and like, okay, I did something stupid, but I don't have to continue to compromise. Like, I mean, that's the easiest thing in the world. Like, you look at people that something happens and they get out of shape. Not like, not you lose a foot or something like that. But like you get laid off, or so many people, like with COVID, you like so many people went one way or the other from a health and fitness perspective. Either you use that time to get really fit and you dialed in your nutrition, or you just let yourself go because you couldn't get into the gym with the consistency or with the comfortability or the convenience that you used to, and you allow that circumstance to determine what you do. And so many people get to that fork in the road. And for me, I believed the lie. And the dangerous thing about a lie is if you believe a lie to be true, it's true to you. And I believed I'd ruined my life. There's nothing else I can do. Everything's up in smoke. I can't act anymore. I can't do modeling anymore. I can't do this. And I'm out in LA already. What other option? The only thing I can do is continue to do porn, which is ridiculous, which is just not true. But I believed that that was true. So that's what I did. So I, that right after I did that, the agent calls me, offers me a contract. I sign it. And I did that for 6 years, did over 1,000 movies. And even while I'm doing that, I'm still thinking, well, I got to be the best. If I'm going to do this, I'll be the best. And that'll make me feel good about myself. And I track the money, I track the awards, I do all the things. And everything I thought would bring me joy and satisfaction, I obtained, but it didn't work.
Yeah, didn't you win Performer of the Year one year?
Yeah,
And that
I got nominated for Performer of the Year 4 years in a row, and on that fourth year, I won it. I won 18 different awards, like tracked my money, like made like well over $1 million, and so I did all that stuff. But I was tracking it and hoping and thinking that I won the awards and made that money, it would fix the way that I felt when I laid my head down on the pillow at night. And it actually amplified my anxiety and it deepened my depression and the despair that I felt and the worthlessness that I felt. Um, it didn't get better. It got much worse.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that I'm sure people in that industry fall for, because
Oh,
the way I've heard you describe it on other podcasts is there really wasn't a whole lot of options outside of that industry. Like, your girlfriends were in the industry, because people outside the industry, if they knew what you were doing, they probably wouldn't want to date you, or when it came out, they didn't want to date you anymore. So you dated people within the industry. I've also heard you say things like, several things that happen like behind the scenes, that to get the scene to make it look a certain way, but it's actually not that way. Other things
yeah.
too, like I think you said the number was 30 people in
No.
the industry that you knew had somehow taken their own life or had overdosed on some sort of drugs, after their career had started to taper or end abruptly in some way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So 30 people. So many more people than that, but 30 people that I knew personally, that I
Yeah.
had a relationship with, that I knew their real first and last name, that, we've broken bread together. Um, yeah, 30 people have either committed suicide or died of overdose. And the crazy part about that is when that happens, the pornography industry, it monetizes and amplifies the suicide. So if they die, they're like, well, let's make a best of compilation of this person and then monetize it, because the porn industry is $100 billion industry and it's fueled by viewership. It's monetized the same way that YouTube is. It actually, YouTube gets that monetization strategy from pornography. Any kind of advances in technology, especially when it comes around media, specifically social media, a lot of those things came from the porn industry. But yeah, it's incredibly sad. You believe that there's nothing else you can do. Everyone around you has been patting you on your back to your detriment. If you stay in that industry long enough, but like for me, I removed anyone that was saying anything negative about me doing it, because I did have people in my life saying, dude, this was cool at first, but man, you've been doing this for a long time. Like, you, what are you doing? Like, you're better than that. Like, there's other things that you can do, but you believe definitively that you can't. There's nothing else you can do. And to your point, what you mentioned earlier, like that was so damaging mentally and emotionally, where you're in a relationship with another person in that industry, and you're both pretending and even literally saying out loud you're in a monogamous relationship with someone, that you would never cheat on them. Yet, as a career, you have sex with other people. And there's even been multiple times where you're sitting at dinner, and of course, most of your friends are probably in that industry. So I'm
Sure.
sitting at dinner with a girl I'm dating, and I had had sex with his girlfriend that week, and he has had sex with my girlfriend, that day. And we're sitting there acting like everything's all good because it's just work. And when you suppress reality, what happens is there's a chaos that happens internally that it's going to come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And it just causes so much brokenness and confusion that you just become detached from reality. And if you become detached from reality, man, it's just not a healthy place to be. And those things have a very real cause and effect.
Mm. I I can't I've heard you say just about everything you just said on other podcasts, and I remember the very first time I heard you play out that scenario when you're at dinner with another couple, and I'm just like, "Oh my God." Like, yeah, I
And
can't
it's
even imagine. It's just it's got to mess with your head. And
oh, and then the girl I was dating, like you know, it didn't bother her, and she even wanted to, just put myself in the, thinking how I was thinking back then. It's where I was a kid with a single mom, so I was the jealous kid of like no one better talk to my mom, and then I was a jealous boyfriend, and then I'm in this industry, and the girl that I was dating, she she wanted to talk about what was going on at set, on set. Like she wanted to talk about like her day at work in a way where it was enticing to her, and really like to almost like dehumanize myself. I just allowed it because I was thinking, well, this is what I signed up for.
yeah,
This is who I am, so this is who I'm supposed to be.
right.
So even in like my own home with the girl that I'm dating, like upon my own volition, I'm saying, I'm saying out loud, like, yeah, I'm good with this, but knowing in my head I'm not, is just like, dude,
Yeah.
it messed me up bad.
And I can't even imagine that, and first of all, thank you for being so forthcoming with all of this. I really what I'd really like to dissect with you, since you have seen things and been a part of things that quite frankly, the camera will never show. Right. So like
Sure.
guys who view, like, just take the average guy who views porn, right? He sees like the scenes, he sees everything's polished up. It's like the highlight reel and everything is
Yeah.
whatever, right? But I think what would be really telling is what happens when that camera's not on. Like, as far as
Yeah,
like,
dude.
because that entire industry, man, is like, I've heard other people describe it. It's so dark and it's
Yeah.
so menacing and it's so sinister that if most people really understood what was going on behind closed doors, probably more people wouldn't view it.
Yeah. I mean, so you get to set. You wouldn't even have a conversation with the girl you're working with. The only way that you would know anything about her is when you get there. The first thing you do is you sign. You give your ID and a copy of you have a full panel STD and AIDS test that people take. It's either I think that the longest that you can go is like 21 days. So like every 21 days you're getting a new full panel test, and you go there, you present your test and your ID, and you look at hers and you see her ID matches up with her name on her test, and you sign that you saw that. And then you go in, and the director or the videographer or photographer or whoever, whatever they're doing, they're like shooting something with her. And then you just get called into set, and the guy, because like the guy's the only person that has the potential of not getting paid, because the director's footing the bill for everything. The director's, he's paying for the talent, he's paying for the crew, he's paying for the location permits, so on and so forth. The editing that will come after. And if the guy doesn't do his job, there's no product. So the guy's not going to get paid if he doesn't do his job. And so there's this pressure on the guy. So almost 100% of the time, guys are going to take some kind of erectile dysfunction medication. Towards the end of my career, everyone was using Caberjack. So it's an injection. It traps the blood in the caverns of your penis. So like you're
No
having an erection,
way.
like no matter what. Oh yeah,
I
because
had
that
no
way
idea. Whoa.
there's no way of you failing the scene.
Right.
So and then the girls are using like lube or numbing cream or whatever, and you get there and you shoot stills, right? You shoot photos of what you're going to do before you do it, and like you're both on another planet. You're posing for the video. I mean, you're posing for the camera. You're not actually doing anything. And then there's the scene, and then while the scene's happening, there's someone holding a light like right underneath you. There's a boom mic like right by your head. A lot of the times the director's like trying to get this over the shoulder thing, so there's like this sweaty dude like holding a camera over your shoulder, and while you're doing it, it's like you're not trying to do it to feel good, you're doing it so the camera can see it. So you're not doing it in a way that you would normally do it, so it doesn't like feel like it would normally feel. And there's 15-20 people on set. There's camera A, B, C. There's someone shooting BTS. There's an assistant like over in the corner like eating chips or whatever, and sometimes, many times, the girl's there with a handler or a pimp, or sometimes her husband or boyfriend, and they're over in the corner like playing Angry Birds or something, and like looking every once in a while. And it's just like the sketchiest thing. And like during the scenes, like if the girl like is hurting or whatever, like you'll stop and cut, or like sometimes they'll stop and like need new battery or whatever, and like you'll be in the middle of what you think is intimacy or whatever, and you'll cut, and the girl will just go like check her phone or whatever, and like it's so not what it's portrayed to be, but that's the point. Is a fantasy. So
Right.
there's two people are being paid to be there, that if you ask them like, hey, could you would you want to do something else for a living? Who's Everyone's going to say yes. There's something that you're passionate about, that you wish you were doing, that you believe that you can't do, so this is what you're doing. So there's two people that are being paid to be there that don't really want to be there. There's a director telling you what to do and how to do it, and then you have to pretend to for it to be intimate in some way. So you're trying to you know portray something that looks like connection, and you're so disconnected. And then that the guy, you have to finish at the end, and it's so crazy. Like most people think like, oh, that's so amazing, dude. At the end of the thing, like you're sitting there like with your phone watching porn, where the girl's like over in the back like getting her makeup touched up, and you're watching porn masturbating, and then you call the camera over when you're done and when you're about to finish, and then everyone gets jumps back into the scene, and that's how movie magic makes it look like there was this like incredible connection between two people, and it's so far from not. And then
Wow.
afterward, you got this check, and you're covered in like lube, and like you're hoping that that erection is going to go away eventually. And sometimes would have to like I would go home and have to like put my legs up and hope that it went down, because if it didn't go down and you took too much, like you would have to go get lanced and let the blood out, because it'd be dangerous if it didn't. And that was a Tuesday. That was I was doing that 20 to 25 times a month. And you put yourself in that place, and you like, gosh, I wish I could have sex with pretty girls for a living. Dude, it's so far from what that is. And like the suicide rates being astronomical, like after being in that for so long, it makes sense, because you dehumanize yourself and you expose yourself to a certain degree, where all you want to do is isolate yourself. You want to isolate yourself because you're so exposed, you're ashamed, so you become this recluse. And every time that you're in public or with someone, or like you're on set, you're doing that. So it's just this like endless cycle that's so brutal. And that end product, it's a million miles from what it actually is.
Gosh, man, that is I've never heard anything like that. And I know I told you I did homework on you, but I didn't hear that part of it. And that is insane, man. That's crazy. I can definitely understand like living that life, what it would feel like to be trapped. Like, cause it's like, well, where else am I going to go? And how else am I going to make a living and pay bills at this point? And then also probably the only people that truly like you feel like understand you are in the industry because they're
Are the
facing
same.
like the same battles, right? But what was the line in the sand for you? I mean, like, dude, you got Performer of the Year nominated. You said 4 times,
Yeah.
over 1,000 films, and then at one point, like, what was you're just like, no more. What
Yeah. Well,
happened?
so I had filmed a scene in Atlanta, and on the plane back to LAX, I was just like, I'm done. And just like the feeling that I was trapped and there was no way to get out. Like I really believe that there was nothing else I can do. So I was like, well, I'm just sick of feeling like this. Like I'll never be able to accomplish anything I hope to accomplish. Like no one's ever gonna take me seriously. There's no woman that I would want to marry that would marry me. It's like for me, like growing up, it's like I wanted to be a dad. And it's like, how could I be a dad after the life I lived? So I really believe that everything that I desired in my heart of hearts was a million miles away and honestly impossible for me to reach. And then, one of the things that I'm most passionate about is being creative in a way that impacts people in a positive way. I want to create something or communicate something in a way that leads people to do the things they didn't think they could do, or experience joy, happiness, things like that. And I was like, man, no one will ever take me seriously again. There's no organization that I'm going to have a seat to be a leader. There's no thing in me that is worth anything. So I'm just going to take my life. So I make a very detailed plan to take my life. And my like a lot of times people will make like this deal where like if this happens, I'll do it. If this doesn't happen, or if this thing happens, I'll not take my life. And for me, I'd gotten home. I had I'd intended to take X amount of pills. I put them on the counter. I grouped them in such where it's like this is enough to swallow at once, where it's not too much, so I'm not gonna like choke or anything. But like this is enough; it should do the trick. And but I had this like check from that shoot like in my pocket, and it was like this payroll check, just like I felt like a 11 by 16 like portrait. It was like huge in my pocket, and it was just driving me crazy. And I took it out and I was looking at it, and I was like, man, um, I can't let what I did and what I went through to get this money. I can't like just throw it away. So I'm gonna put it in the bank so that after I'm dead, like my mom or my brother or someone will get this money. And I go into the bank, but I was like, well, when I go into the bank and slide the check across the counter, I'm sure that the person's going to like say something crude or like make a face or something, because on the memo of the check, it would say something grotesque. It would say the name of the movie, or it would say something crazy. They did it on purpose. They thought it was funny. Where you would put the memo of the check where it's like this was, for whatever it was, they would put that, but they would put the title. And I was like, okay, they're gonna say something. And I slid the check across the counter, and I had to be like shaking. I was, minutes from taking my life. And I thought she was gonna say something crude to me. And she looked me in the eye and said, Joshua, are you okay?
God.
Joshua, is there something I can do for you? And what she had no idea, then it had been over a year since I heard my name, because I'd stopped talking to my mom. I stopped talking to my friends and family. Anyone that was saying anything other than, I love what you do, you're awesome, because hey, I love you, you're better than that, come home, it was starting to get to me. And that's the beauty of accountability. It's like you either listen to it and respond to it, or you push it away. and I pushed everybody away. So when she said my name, that was the first time that I had heard my real name in over a year, because the people that I was interacting with, even at the gym and the barber, like they all were calling me by my stage name. So that person, they saw me, I had to be like shaking, I had to be like freaking out. And they just looked at me and simply said, "Hey, Joshua, are you okay?"
What did you
And
say?
little did I didn't say anything. I just like bolted. I'd already had my receipt. The transaction was done. I just like ran. I ran out the bank, and I was in Sherman Oaks, California, and I like ran across the street to where I was living, and I just like went inside, and I like had this like moment in front of the mirror where I like looked at myself and I had no idea who I was looking at, and I cried and I cried and I cried, and then I called my mom, and I was like, it almost like broke me out of the shell of like my selfishness, because my shame, like shame will often cause you to be selfish.
Yeah.
And I was withholding simply my mom just wanting to know, like, yes, she wanted me to stop doing what I was doing, but at that period, she just wanted to know, are you alive? And I was withholding that from her. And I call her, and I expect her to chew me out or hang up on me. And she said the same thing she said, for the last 6, 7 years. "Joshua, I love you. You're so much better than this. Please, please, please come home." So I did. So I pick up the phone, and I call my agent. I quit. I quit. I quit. I called everyone I needed to call. And it's like so like crazy to think I was like cognizant to do this, like, but I even like called my PR person and like put out a press release that I was retiring. But yeah, so that the day that I had planned to take my life, I decided to run for my life. And that was the last day I was in the porn industry.
Can I just share some takeaways that just coming up for me personally? And I just want to bounce these off you, and I'm sure you've thought of these, but I just want to hear how you respond to them. You're a big time faith based person, so am I. And I think your story is such a beautiful story of redemption, but I also think it's an incredible story of spiritual warfare.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it's like buying into this story, almost this trick. Like, I gotcha, and
Yeah.
there's no getting out of this, and this is all you can do, and this is all you are, and it's like literally like this spiritual warfare of somebody getting trapped. And then, I look at this bank teller as almost like a sign from God that somebody saw you in the moment that you need to be seen, looked you dead in the eye, called you by your name, and are you okay? And that was a trigger, a domino effect into you now living this totally different life. And it came from a bank teller. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a very real way, there's so many times that you feel these premonitions or these promptings that I believe are from the Holy Spirit, that, man, say something to this person, you know? Um, and it could be something as simple as saying someone's name, asking someone how they're doing, and actually waiting for them to answer. It could be so simple, but I think that these divine promptings that we have, you have no idea. In the state of, we're nearing 8 billion people in the population, and so many people feel alone, hopeless. Every 40 seconds, someone takes their own life. Crazy statistic, but in a place where people feel so unseen and so unheard and feeling like they don't matter, that person just simply said, "Hey, are you okay?" And it changed the trajectory of my life. And like you're saying, faith is something that's huge for me. So my name Joshua actually means God is salvation, that God saves. Um, and the fact that I wasn't going by the name that was mine, and someone used my name to call me out of a place of death, is something I'll never forget.
That is, it's one of the most powerful things I've heard, man, on this podcast. Not this one, but all of them that I've done. You know, you move back home, and I know, you know, at the time, you know, you were just, a lot of people knew you. And I think you started working at a gym, correct?
Yeah. So the only thing I had in my repertoire or my back pocket, as I would say, it was a level one CrossFit certification. Yeah. So I was like, that's literally the only thing I can think of that I can do. So I applied to every CrossFit gym, that was like, hey, I need, to make this full time, so I need a place that are going to give me, at least a decent amount of classes a week. And I find this gym in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they hire me, and I didn't tell them about my past. And a few weeks into it, they did, and they were going to fire me, but they were like, hey, the person that you're portrayed to be online and the person I know you as today, it's like there's something about you. You genuinely care about people. And I think that you're actually a good coach. So we're gonna set some healthy boundaries between you and personal training clients, but I think that you're here for a reason and we want you to stay. So that was huge. This
Yeah.
person giving me an opportunity that I absolutely didn't deserve. I didn't, I wasn't forthcoming. And so I'm like, I had the same mentality. Well, I'm gonna be the best trainer there's ever been. So I had the financial means to do so. So I, get every certification under the sun, like nutrition, gymnastics, weightlifting, like you name it. And I very quickly start to, rise in the ranks in that gym and become a head coach. And like in a CrossFit gym, being a head coach is like the equivalent of like being, in management. And you're making more, you're full time, so on and so on. And then after a period of time, 2 years, I'm doing pretty good, but laying my head down on the pillow at night, still like wrestling with like every single time I met a new person, it was only a matter of time. I was one Google search away from them finding out all this stuff about me. And then, it being a problem if I was doing any kind of personal training with this person or something like that. Cause like in a CrossFit gym, like coaching classes, because like a CrossFit gym today is very different, 10 years ago, like very different. So like now, like there's a lot of established CrossFit gyms. They have full-time coaches, benefits, all that good stuff. Not the case 10 years ago. So to make that your full-time job, you had to have personal training clients. So that's what I was doing. But at the same time, every time someone would find out about my past, it was a possibility that I would lose that client or they'd want to start training with someone else or it just got weird. And that was just something that I wrestled with for 2 years. And then, 2 years in, this girl walks in, best athlete in the gym. She was, in CrossFit. If you can do gymnastics well, like you got a upper hand on everyone else, so she could like walk on her hands and do muscle ups and do all this stuff. And she was just super gorgeous. And I asked her out on a date and she shot me down, which made me fall in love with her, and I was like,
uh,
rejection. Oh, this is amazing. And um there was just something about her and I continued to pursue her and she was like, well, we can go for a run. And I met her to go for this run and there was just something, I think it was like a combination of like my mom's voice in my head and the spirit of God that was working on me said, don't you lie to that girl. And she shows up for this run and I was like, hey, you know, I'm just gonna, in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna do you a favor and I'm gonna do myself a favor because we're both gonna end up getting hurt. Um, here's here's how bad I am, you know. And I told her everything. And
yeah,
at the
can I
end of
just,
me,
I just have to ask this question. Like, how did you tell her? Like, what were the words that
I
you
just blurted,
used?
like honestly, at this point in my life, like because of me being in the porn industry, like I had no fear.
Yeah.
Like there was no situation that intimidated me. But at the same time, I was pretty socially awkward. I was like, Tropic Thunder. Like I was every day I was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. Like I was, but like I was so separated from reality.
Yeah.
Honestly, like somewhat socially awkward. So what happened is I just like word vomited everything. I was like, hey, and honestly, like knowing what I know today, like a lot of it was like so crazy, like you couldn't even comprehend it. Like if someone that doesn't understand like Olympic weightlifting, if you tell them that you snatched 100 kilos, you're like, what are you talking about? What is a snatch? How much weight is that? I don't get it. And in a real way, she's like, I never seen pornography, knew what it was, but not really. Just knew that it was sex that was videotaped and it was on, the internet. But like what I was saying was just so crazy to her. She was just like, you know, didn't know what to say. So like after me, like just like spilling the beans of all the bad things I've done in my life, she's pretty taken back. And then she just gets serious all of a sudden. She's like, well, you know, you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And you're not defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do. I believe God defines who a person is. He's the author of all things, and he gets the final say. Do you know him? Do you know who God is? And I was like, sure. I went to church a little bit when I was a kid, and I, it's impossible to not hear something about Jesus, being in, Western culture. So I was like, yeah, because for me at that point, I had no idea who I was. So I just took on the role of whoever I believed the person across from me wanted me to be. And I became that because I wanted them to like me. So I was like, yeah, sure. I believe in God. Yeah. And she was like, well, what's your relationship with Jesus like? You know, what, do you attend church anywhere? Do you do life with a group of people who are following Jesus also that are, holding you accountable? Who do you do life with? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like whatever, if that
I
is
hang out at the CrossFit gym if you've noticed.
yeah,
So
I was
that's
like,
my
yeah,
circle.
like I do push-ups 24
Yeah.
hours a day, but yeah, I mean but that was 100% true. It's like either I was either at the CrossFit gym like coaching, or I was training, or I was probably texting someone about CrossFit. But yeah. And she was like, well, my family are all Christian. I've been Christian since I was in the 7th grade, and I'm not perfect by any means, but my relationship with Jesus is the foundation of how I live my life. What kind of food do you like? I was just like, what? You don't want me to leave? And she was genuinely interested in me. She wanted to know like my goals and hopes and dreams and aspirations. And
Wow, man.
to be honest, I didn't have any. I I, I had no like short or long term goals for myself. I had nothing. I was just like, I'm just hoping that I don't get found out
Yeah,
every
I
day.
mean, at that point you were just like, oh my gosh, like I can actually be somehow, some way, hopefully reinserted into somewhat of a normal life. But every day is kind of new and I'm not really sure what's going to
Yeah, like
happen.
every
So it's like, yeah. So
yeah,
not even thinking.
yeah, like literally a win for me was someone not bring up my past. Like if I could go a day with someone not pointing to the person I used to be, like that was a win for me. But yeah, I mean, we just had this like incredible conversation. Like we never ran. We just walked and talked for hours. And then we texted all week. And then she invited me to go to church with her the next weekend. And I showed up, and I was pretty apprehensive. I thought like this is not a place that I should be. I disqualified myself from this place. I
Yeah,
thought
not
that I
worthy.
was too, yeah, I'm not worthy for this place. And then I get there, and there's actually this like big wooden plaque, and it's like, we want to love people where they are and encourage them to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. And I was like, sorry.
No, you're good.
Man, I should have grabbed.
If it
Oh
makes
my
you
god.
makes you feel any better, I did that on my first date with my wife. Like I like had it took like 3 or 4 minutes. So
Yeah. But I was just like, man, I don't have any place here.
yeah.
And I go in, and the pastor was wearing a t-shirt and jeans. And I was like, I thought, he had to be wearing a suit. you know, the just like everything I thought you had to be a Christian, it was slowly being torn down. And then I hear him talk about this dynamic between Jonathan and David, two kings. They were friends. And when Jonathan had died in that culture, when a new king came into reign, the previous kingdom was wiped out. They were literally killed because they didn't want them to think they had access to this new kingdom. But David was different. He was like, hey, is there anyone left out of Jonathan's family, out of his lineage? And Mephibosheth was left. And this is a story out of 2 Samuel. And they go and find Mephibosheth, and Mephibosheth knew history, so he was expecting for him to be killed. He knew what happened. He heard, you know, that Jonathan had died and David became king, which meant his head was on a plate. He was deserving of death, and that's not what happened. David sent a guard to bring him back into his kingdom, and he restored, his land. He brought him into his kingdom and gave him a seat. And then the pastor says, "Man, you know what? Romans 3:23 says that we've all sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And Romans 6:23 says the wage of sin is death. So who's guilty? Everybody.
All of us.
And
Yeah.
who's deserving of and who's deserving of death?
Yeah.
Everybody. So the death that Mephibosheth was expecting, in a very real way, we're all deserving of that same death. There's a bridge that we need to get to God that we can't build on our own. So I'm hearing all this, and he's talking about how Jesus, being fully God, fully man, he comes and lives a perfect life, dies on the cross, raised on the third day, pays the sin for me and for all that'll call on his name. But I'm like, man, why would God in flesh, like, why would he die for me? Like my own father didn't want me. Like, it doesn't make sense. And then, it's one of those moments where like you feel like, have you experienced this, or like you're in a church, or maybe you're at a concert, or wherever you might be, but like something's just speaking directly to you, and you feel like you're the only two people in the room. He says, well, it was with joy set before him that he endured the cross. It was obedience to his father and love for you. God loved me, and that's why he chose to die for me. The father that I was so desperately seeking for, I realized I had. And since that day, I've been forever changed. And the guilt and the shame that I was wearing, not because of the porn, but this real belief that I thought I was inadequate, that I was unworthy, that there was something that was wrong with me. After all the tears and the snot it made its way, um, I stood up and I felt like somebody.
Joshua, I got to tell you, man. So I'm a Christian. I really I've really deepened my faith over the past 4 years. Uh, watched the movie or watched the show The Chosen. Really have gotten in depth with, my relationship with Christ. Every Thursday morning, I'm in a Bible study. And I used to be of this belief, and I really want to talk to the audience that, because I'm sure we're going to get some guys who listen to this and they're just shaking their heads like, no, 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 no. And I used to be one of those guys too. But here's what I'll tell you to build on what you just said is that, where do I want to start with this? I want to start with this. So when I watched the movie The Chosen, I didn't really understand, or the show The Chosen, I didn't really understand why tax collectors like Matthew they were just hated so badly by so many, right? I mean, they were a disgrace, right? The Jewish
Yeah.
people hated them because they looked at them as traitors, right? And they were kind of like a pawn for the Roman Empire. They were just like stuck in this limbo, right? Probably felt, Matthew, I think, felt a lot like you did. There's no one who wants me. There's nothing else I can do. So I have to just live this life, right?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this part in The Chosen where the Pharisees come and visit Jesus when he's having dinner with Matthew and some of the other sinners, quote unquote sinners and prostitutes. And they're like, what are you doing? If you're like the Messiah, like you're not supposed to cooperate with these people, hang out with these people. And he's like, well, last time I looked, it's not the people who are well that need a physician. It's the people who are sick.
Yeah.
It's actually the sinners that actually need the redemption, not the people who, and I was just like, wow. And then you think about the thief who's on the side of Jesus dying and asks for forgiveness. I was at church, and that gospel, that part of the gospel in that sermon was talked about a lot. It's like, and the priest made it kind of a joke of it. He's like, the guy probably went up to heaven. They were probably like, you're here? Like, how did you even get here? It's like, I actually really don't know. All I did was ask for forgiveness at the end and they let me in. Like, he kind of made it into a joke. But, if you really think about it, like, the grace that's available to us. And this is where I really think spiritual warfare is at its best, because when spiritual warfare is at its best, that whole shame, guilt, unworthiness, it's like in your face, and it's in your face so much that you literally can't see past it. And
Yeah.
I had a, I was, and I'll close with this thought. My boys and I were having this conversation not too terribly long ago. And my boys put me in this really weird sort of situation, like, all right, dad, here's the situation. It's us four boys and mom, and you have to choose, 4 out of 5 of us that will survive, but you need to choose who passes away. And I'm like, that's easy. And they're like, well, who would it be? I was like, that would be me. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, you're not on it. I'm like, well, that's who I would choose. Like,
Yeah.
that's who I would choose. I would like literally walk off of, I would walk off a ledge. No, I would take a bullet. No, there's not one question in
Yeah.
my mind. And one of them looked at me and they're like, you would die for me? And I'm like, I wouldn't even have to think about it. I wouldn't even have to think about it. Of course I would. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, but I like like you could just tell they're trying to find the words of like, well, I don't know if I'm worthy of that. And I'm like, it wouldn't be even a, and I truly think that's how God loves us. I mean, he gave his only son, right? And
Yeah.
that redemption, that grace is actually there because he's the one who actually showed it to us first. But
Yeah.
the thing that I want you to wrap up with and close with is, Joshua, I really look at your I admire the work that you're doing. I admire the work that you're doing because it is such a story of redemption. It is such a story of grace, not only for yourself, but the people who loved you most. Even your wife, Hope, like she was just like, yeah, okay, great. Let's move on and we'll get this figured out. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but I would love for you to share your experience on this for like, I mean, if anyone didn't feel that they were worthy, it would be you. And there's other people out there that just like, well, it's just not for me. I'm just not worthy, or I'm a sinner, or I'm this. It's the story that they're telling themselves. What message would you share for those guys?
Yeah. Um, yeah. So the person I went on that walk with is now my wife.
Yeah.
And we've got 4 boys now, and honestly, literally everything that I justified for a reason to take my life that I believed I would never have because I disqualified myself from them, I have all of it and more. And it's funny you talk about, like, so that's that verse is from Luke 23, and that's when you walk into our home, we've got this giant wooden sign, and it says, the man in the middle told me I could come. The man in the middle told me I could come. So Jesus being in the middle, and the two thieves being on each side. It says the man in the middle told me I could come.
Are you serious? That's really
And
in your that's in your house? And we talked
yeah,
about that's crazy. Okay.
um, but man, I would just say this: guilt and shame keep you stuck where you are. Anytime I speak to a group of men that are struggling with pornography, it's like, man, guilt and shame keep you stuck where you are. And if you don't think that's true, if you were looking at porn in a public place and someone came in proximity to you, what would you do? You put your phone down. There's there's a level of shame that's associated with it that is beyond explanation. And you treat yourself that way. And you feel like you can't talk about, especially as men, we feel like we can't talk about our struggles. We can't be honest with one another. We can't open up. And for me, what broke the cycle of keeping me stuck where I was in this belief, this negative mindset that I'm broken, there's something wrong with me because of what I've done. This is always going to be, this is always going to impact me. Man, you don't have to stay stuck where you are. No matter what your life looks like, you don't have to stay stuck where you are. Is it going to be a lot of work? Yeah, it is. You can't, like, there's no like snapping of my fingers at me being where I am. There was a year of counseling. It was me removing a lot of toxic stuff from my life. It was me doing something as simple as unfollowing a lot of people, getting rid of some apps, until I could use them, more appropriately. There were so many things, but man, I just want you to know that if you feel like your life has been ruined by something that's happened to you, or there was a series of events that were your fault, you made a series of bad choices, that does not have to define the rest of your life. Whatever you've done or whatever you experience, I guarantee you there's someone in your circle that if you find someone that you trust and you tell them, they've either experienced what you've experienced, they've done what you've done, or they know someone that has, and they're gonna walk with you as you go on this series of changes. You don't have to stay stuck. And the thing that you want to accomplish that you feel like you could never accomplish, man, that's Satan. Satan is real, and he wants to kill, destroy, and just take from you everything that God put in you. Like, God has given you gifts and talents and abilities to do something impactful. The very purpose that you have is to do something that's bigger than you. The reason that you're alive, there's reason that there's breath in your lungs, is there's something for you to accomplish. And if you stay stuck in this shame and guilt cycle, you'll never do that thing because you feel like you're unworthy. So step one, tell someone about your struggle, and then do something about it, because you don't have to stay stuck where you are. So that's my story. That's my hope for everyone. There's something great within you, but to get there, you've got to relinquish the thing that's holding you back. The thing that seems unmentionable, it's not. Tell someone and start that process of moving your life into a new direction.
I heard a quote from a good mentor of mine: isolation is the enemy of excellence. And what I hear you really saying is, by removing shame and guilt, it's really connection to other like-minded people that can
Yeah.
help. I think the more we put spotlight on the shame and the guilt, the more we take the power away. And the more we have
Yeah.
community that helps us elevate, trusted advisors, that's what really moves the needle in our lives.
Yeah, man. If you find yourself in, even if you find yourself in leadership, if you find yourself being in a place where you don't have anyone giving you constructive criticism, or you feel like you cannot receive constructive criticism, that's actually a trigger for you to respond to say, hey, there's not something right with me. Because if someone that loves you is giving you feedback that stings a little bit, but it's true, that's an opportunity for you to change, not to
100%.
push them away. Yeah.
100%. Well, as we wrap up here, I want to just, if people want to connect with you, and plus, like, I would, any teaser. I mean, I'm in the middle of a book deal myself, so there's only like so many things I can talk about with my new book coming out
Yeah.
on Father's Day next year. But any teasers you can tell us about this book coming out in spring, and we'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so we're almost at pre-order. So the title of the book is Seven Lies That Will Ruin Your Life. So we're talking about your heart actually desires the false promises of this world, but they actually lead to destruction. So that's going to come out March 5th. So super, 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 super excited about that. Really talking about many of the lies that I believed and the truth that I had found that destroy those lies and allowed me to walk into freedom, into health, into the calling and the vision that I have for my life today. I can only be the man that I am today that because I found what was true and I stopped allowing lies to lead me into the wrong direction. So that's what the book is about. So it's seven big lies of the world combated with the truth that's found in the Word of God.
That's so cool, man. And then if anybody wants to just, I know you put a lot of fantastic content on Instagram. I follow you there. It's always really inspirational stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
so my social media across the board is I am Joshua Broome, and if you're listening to this and you're someone that wants to have me on your podcast or speak in an event or preach at a church, my website is joshuabroome.me. So I try to post some of my latest events there, podcasts that I've been on, speaking engagements, stuff like that.
well, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome to have this conversation with you, and I hopefully it was helpful. I know it was helpful for guys in the audience. Guys, if you want to connect with Joshua, go grab a pre-order of his book. Head on over to thedadedge.com/449 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/449. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on today. Super heartfelt, man. And from one dad raising four boys to another. Hey, we need all the help we can get.
Absolutely. You're a little you're a little far down further down the road than I am. So maybe I'll hit you up with some tips.
I can help you out. I can.
Sounds
Thanks
good,
again,
man.
brother.